I told you that the absolute worst thing you could possibly do for your mental health today is to try and stop feeling guilty about your bad habits?
I mean, it sounds totally backwards,
It
right?
really does.
Oh,
Because we live in an era that just preaches constant self-forgiveness. Like, we are bombarded with messaging telling us to banish guilt, own our choices, and, treat ourselves without a single ounce of apology.
oh, absolutely. The whole treat yourself culture is everywhere.
Right. But today's deep dive is going to completely dismantle that cultural narrative. We are pulling from this remarkably counterintuitive article in Psychology today.
Yeah, it's by Dr. Eric Solomon.
Exactly. It's titled In Defense of Your Guilty Pleasures. And we're looking at that alongside a stack of behavioral research that proves the guilt you feel over your weird little indulgences isn't a bug in your psychological hardware.
It's actually a highly necessary feature.
Yes. So, by the time we wrap this up, you are going to understand the exact neurobiological reasons why trying to cure yourself of that guilt might actually destroy your ability to experience pleasure altogether. Okay, let's unpack this.
It really is a radical reframing of how we understand our own private behaviors.
It is.
Because we tend to view our hidden rituals, whether that's devouring a lowbrow romance novel in the bathtub or binging a terrible reality show.
For like eating a highly specific, structurally unsound snack over the sink at midnight.
Right. We view all of those as moral failings. We think they represent this lack of discipline. But the psychological data reveals a completely different reality. These moments are actually very sophisticated acts of self-preservation.
Okay, but before we get into the heavy laboratory data and the literal brain circuitry behind why that happens, I think we need to look at what a guilty pleasure actually looks like in the wild.
Oh, the Sharon story.
Yes. Dr. Solomon grounds his entire thesis in a childhood memory that I think perfectly isolates the strange mechanics of this behavior. He talks about being 10 years old and walking home from school early with his friend Brian to play video games.
Right. And they walk into the house.
Yeah, they open the front door to Brian's house, and Brian's mom, Sharon, is sitting right there in the kitchen. Now, Dr. Solomon points out that Sharon had a very specific reputation. Like, she was the ultimate selfless caretaker. Her house was the neighborhood headquarters.
She had cultivated this very rigid, highly altruistic identity.
Right, she existed to serve everyone else. But on this random afternoon, the two 10-year-olds walk in, and Sharon is sitting completely alone at the table eating a See's candy bonbon.
Just a piece of chocolate she bought with her own money.
In her own house. And
Oh.
when the kids walk in, she completely freezes. Like, she blushes bright pink, gets highly defensive, and just stammers out, "You caught me! It's my little guilty pleasure."
It is a phenomenal case study
Yeah.
because her physiological reaction, I mean, the sudden blush, the defensive posture, the literal confession of being caught,
That's so dramatic.
it is.
Yeah.
It's wildly disproportionate to the action. She is a grown adult eating a piece of cocoa and sugar. It's a completely victimless act, and yet she reacts as if she has just been caught committing corporate espionage.
It makes me think about how we structure our lives. Like,
Yeah.
a guilty pleasure is essentially a secret room in your house that you built yourself, but you pretend doesn't exist when company comes over.
I love that
You,
analogy.
you sneak in there when nobody is looking. You enjoy the space, but the second someone knocks on the front door, you throw a rug over the trap door and act like you were just standing in the hallway.
Exactly.
But I have to push back a little on the terminology here. What actually separates this from a bad habit or, I don't know, even a straight up addiction? Because sometimes when I'm eating junk food at 2 a.m., it doesn't feel like I'm visiting a fun secret room. It feels like I'm on autopilot, like I'm just a zombie in front of the fridge. Where is the line between a quirky indulgence and a genuine loss of control?
What's fascinating here is that distinction is exactly what researchers at Columbia Business School set out to map.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Michelle Tuan Pham and Jing-Swan Liu at the R-Red Lab, which stands for Research on Emotions and Decisions. They analyzed extensive consumer diaries to figure out where that boundary lies.
And what did they find?
They found that true guilty pleasures are highly compartmentalized. They do not look like the autopilot zombie eating you just described.
Wait, really? So it's not just mindlessly eating?
No, they follow incredibly strict self-imposed rules. They almost always happen at specific times, in specific places, and crucially, when the person is completely alone.
Oh, wow. So it's essentially scheduled indulgence.
Precisely.
Like an internal negotiation where you say, I earn this, but only today, even if only today magically happens every single Tuesday night at 9 p.m.
Right, and that brings us to the URI-D Lab's formal definition. They classify A guilty pleasure as an intentional violation.
Intentional violation, okay.
It is not a lapse in consciousness. Addiction and deeply ingrained bad habits are defined by a fundamental loss of autonomy. The choice disappears.
Well, right, you feel like you have to do it.
Exactly. But in Sharon's case, she had complete autonomy. She could have put the C's candy down. She just consciously, intentionally chose to violate her own boundary.
But wait, if it is perfectly controlled and the boundary is completely arbitrary, why does it trigger such a visceral reaction?
Well, think about her reaction.
If Sharon knows she's not actually hurting anyone, why the bright pink blush?
Because the dominant emotion in that moment isn't moral guilt at all. When psychologists drill down into the emotional landscape of these indulgences, they find that what we are actually experiencing is acute embarrassment.
Embarrassment, not guilt.
Exactly. It is the profound fear of being seen doing something that fundamentally contradicts the story we tell the world about who we are.
Oh, so it's an identity clash.
Yes. Sharon had built an entire persona around being the neighborhood caretaker, the woman who puts everyone else's needs before her own.
Right, so the embarrassment wasn't about the chocolate itself.
No, not at all.
It was about the fact that she was doing something entirely for herself, for absolutely no productive reason.
She was exposed. For a woman whose entire social currency is wrapped up in selflessness, being caught in a moment of pure, unadulterated selfishness feels like a massive breach of contract.
Oh, I see.
The guilty pleasure is just the indulger allowing themselves to be a normal, messy human being who wants something simply because they want it.
It doesn't serve her family, it doesn't optimize her health, it doesn't further her career. It just feels good.
Exactly.
But wait, if it's just about being off-brand and contradicting the story we tell ourselves, why do we call it a guilty pleasure? Why not just call it an embarrassing pleasure?
This raises an important question because we are both the indulger and the warden in this scenario.
Oh, right. We're the ones locking ourselves up.
We set the boundaries and we police them internally. So it feels like guilt because it's a self-imposed constraint we are actively choosing to break.
Okay, but if we are essentially acting as our own wardens, creating these rigid identities and then punishing ourselves when we step out of line, the logical solution seems obvious.
Just unlock the cell door.
Exactly. Just unlock the door. Why don't we just follow the cultural trend of modern self-care and drop the guilt entirely? Like, if the guilt is just internal branding, let's rebrand.
Well, that is the exact hypothesis behavioral scientist Kelly Goldsmith decided to test.
Really?
Yes, and her findings are completely paradigm shifting because they prove that if you actually take the guilt away, you destroy the pleasure itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How do you even test that in a lab setting? How do you force someone to feel guilty about a truffle?
Goldsmith and her team used behavioral priming.
Okay.
They brought in groups of participants and had them engage in classic indulgent experiences. Eating rich chocolates, watching highly entertaining but mindless video clips, reading about scandalous romantic escapades, things like that.
Okay, the fun stuff.
Right. But before they indulged, the researchers manipulated their emotional state using subtle reading prompts and word puzzles.
Sneaky.
One group was primed to feel disgust. Another was primed to feel sadness. And a third group was primed to feel guilt.
I mean, I would assume the group primed with guilt would report the lowest enjoyment. Like, if you're already feeling guilty and then you eat a piece of cake, the cake just tastes like regret.
That is exactly what conventional wisdom would suggest. But the data showed the exact opposite.
Wait, really?
Yes. The participants primed with disgust or sadness felt nothing special. I mean, their enjoyment was relatively baseline.
Okay.
But the group primed to feel guilt reported a significantly amplified enjoyment of the experience.
Amplified.
Yes. The guilt didn't ruin the indulgence. It heightened it. It proved that the negative emotion is a structural, load-bearing component of the enjoyment.
So the guilt is essentially like sea salt on a caramel.
Oh, I love that.
On paper, you'd think salt would ruin the sweet candy, right? Because salt is harsh, it's savory, it belongs on meat.
Right.
But when you put a heavy flake of sea salt on a rich caramel, the harshness actually activates your palate. It provides contrast and it makes the sweetness sharper and more complex.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
In psychology, the sea salt on the caramel is called ambivalence.
Ambivalence, okay.
It's the cognitive ability to hold two completely contradictory feelings in your mind at the exact same time without resolving them.
Enjoyment and self-judgment.
Exactly. You are holding the profound sensory enjoyment of the act right alongside the harsh self-judgment of the act. And the thing is, humans generally despise ambivalence.
Oh, yeah. We crave cognitive closure. We want things to be easily categorized as good or bad, healthy or toxic, productive or wasteful.
Right, we want a clean spreadsheet for our lives, so we don't have to burn calories navigating the gray areas.
Absolutely. But I want to deliver on the promise we made at the top of the deep dive. You mentioned earlier that there is literal brain circuitry involved here.
There is.
So how does this ambivalence actually rewire our brains to require the guilt?
It comes down to a fundamental principle of neurobiology known as Hebbian learning. Have you heard the phrase, neurons that fire together wire together?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so think about the cultural conditioning we all undergo from a very young age. We are constantly taught to associate indulgence with shame.
Right. From the time we're little kids.
Exactly. So over years and years of this conditioning, the brain's fear and social judgment center, which is the amygdala, begins firing at the exact same time as the brain's reward center.
Which is the nucleus accumbens, right? The dopamine cell.
You got it. Pumps out dopamine. So the fear of social exposure and the joy of the sugar hit are literally traveling down the same neural highway.
That is wild. The circuits have actually fused.
Completely fused. When you activate the amygdala through a self-imposed taboo, the dopamine pathways light up right alongside it. It creates a state of heightened physiological arousal.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If you strip the guilt away, like if you follow the modern self-help advice to just own it and stop feeling bad, you remove the amygdala from the equation.
Because there's no fear of judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you drop the physiological arousal, the dopamine spike actually flattens out. Without the neural friction of feeling like you're getting away with something, the thrill evaporates.
It just becomes another boring, mundane activity.
Exactly.
It ruins the cognitive friction, because if you aren't breaking a rule, there is no rush. But tolerating that friction, sitting in that ambivalence where the amygdala and the nucleus accumbens are both screaming at you, that actually requires a tremendous amount of psychological flexibility.
It is a massive indicator of psychological resilience.
Really?
Yes, because it proves that your identity is not so rigid that it shatters into a million pieces the moment you do something off-brand.
Like Sharon.
Exactly. Sharon could eat the bonbon, feel the intense embarrassment, deeply enjoy the chocolate, and still wake up the next morning as a loving, generous caretaker.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The guilty pleasure is the internal pressure valve that proves we can bend without breaking.
Well, if this cognitive friction is so vital to our resilience, it makes me look at our current societal trajectory with a lot of concern.
How so?
Dr. Solomon's article leans heavily into the sociological angle of this, arguing that we desperately need these rituals today more than at any point in human history.
Oh, for sure.
We are living in a society that is aggressively obsessed with hyper-optimization. Every single choice we make is supposed to cohere into this polished, highly curated narrative.
It's exhausting.
It is. We are told to monetize our hobbies, track our sleep cycles, optimize our macros, and curate our feeds to reflect our perfectly aligned personal brands.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are doing all of this alongside the rise of artificial intelligence. Dr. Solomon works with AI regularly, and he highlights this profound contrast. We live in a world where AI is drafting our emails, summarizing our meetings, and relentlessly streamlining every waking second of our existence to remove friction.
So in that hyper-optimized context, the guilty pleasure transitions from a quirky habit into the ultimate act of human rebellion.
Yes.
Because it completely defies the logic of the algorithm. AI will never have a guilty pleasure. ChatGPT is never going to blush because someone caught it watching a trashy reality show at 2 a.m.
Exactly. It doesn't have a curated identity to clash with, and it doesn't require a pressure valve. AI cannot feel embarrassment.
Right.
It cannot experience ambivalence. A guilty pleasure cannot be optimized, it cannot be hacked, it cannot be delegated, and it cannot be scaled for profit.
It produces absolutely nothing of value.
Nothing. And that lack of productivity is its highest virtue. These secret, slightly shameful, utterly pointless little moments are the last uncommodifiable corners of our lives. They exist entirely because you are a messy, complex human being who simply likes something. They are proof that we are not just productivity machines.
Okay, so if this cognitive friction is the point, if the guilt and the secrecy are what keep us tethered to our humanity, how do we actively protect them in our daily lives?
Well, it's a bit tricky.
Because honestly, if I just state my habit out loud and I feel that wince of embarrassment and I try to protect that boundary, I still feel a profound sense of failure because I do this every single Tuesday night.
You feel like you're failing yourself.
Yeah. I look at the clock and think, I am doing this again. I have zero discipline.
That feeling of failure is exactly what Dr. Solomon addresses when he outlines his 3 steps for protecting the human spark. He argues that you have to stop apologizing for the rhythm of the indulgence.
The rhythm.
Yeah. We mistake that predictability, the fact that it happens every Tuesday night, or is triggered by a specific stressor for a lack of willpower.
Right, because it feels like a habit we can't break.
But it is actually your brain successfully executing a self-regulation routine. The rhythm isn't a trap, it is a tool.
Oh.
Your neurology has found a reliable way to release the pressure of your curated identity, and it is executing it perfectly.
We have to stop viewing the scheduled release as a bug. It's the system working exactly as intended.
Exactly.
But earlier you mentioned stating it out loud and feeling the wince, which was Dr. Solomon's first step, right? Saying it out loud. How does acknowledging it to someone else help protect the friction if the whole point is that it's a secret room?
Well, the goal isn't to broadcast it to the world. The goal is to acknowledge the boundary.
Okay.
Dr. Solomon suggests telling just one person without any disclaimers.
So no softening it?
Right, you don't soften it, you don't rationalize it, you just state it as a fact. And when you do, pay close attention to that slight internal wince you feel.
Oh, I know that wince.
That tiny moment of discomfort is crucial because that wince is the exact perimeter of your performative identity. It marks the precise location where the polished professional ends and your authentic self begins.
You need to feel the wince to map the boundaries.
Exactly. And then the 3rd step is, once you map it, you protect it ruthlessly.
How do you do that?
Be incredibly selective about who gets access to this part of your life. In a culture that demands we share everything, you do not owe your hidden ritual to anyone as content for your social media.
Oh, that's such a good point.
You don't owe it as a funny anecdote at a networking event, and you certainly don't owe it as a confession to be judged. It belongs to you.
Right.
And protecting it means you cannot let anyone, especially yourself, talk you out of the guilt that makes it work.
So what does this all mean? When you look at all of this, the RD lab diaries, Kelly Goldsmith's behavioral priming, the neurobiology of the amygdala and the reward centers, it completely shatters the way we are told to operate.
It really does.
For you, listening to this right now, it means that whether your secret is watching reality TV on a Tuesday night, reading trashy romance novels, or hiding in the kitchen eating chocolate, you need to stop viewing these moments as failures of willpower.
They aren't signs of weakness.
No. They are highly sophisticated, beautifully complex acts of self-regulation. They are the messy, unoptimizable cracks in our carefully curated identities.
Yeah.
And ironically, the very friction of those cracks is exactly what allows us to bend without breaking and hold ourselves together in a world that demands relentless perfection.
It demands that we completely rethink our relationship with our own discomfort. And I think it leaves us with a deeply provocative, almost haunting question about the future we are building.
I'm ready. What is it?
If the guilt, the secrecy, and the cognitive friction are precisely the ingredients that give these pleasures their power and keep us uniquely human,
Right.
what happens if society continues its current aggressive trend of normalizing and optimizing absolutely everything?
Oh, wow.
If we keep tearing down every boundary, removing all the friction, and sanitizing our lives until we run out of things to feel slightly embarrassed about, will we eventually have to start inventing entirely new taboos just so we can break them and feel alive?
That is a thought that is going to stick with me. We might have to start building entirely new secret rooms just to have somewhere to hide from the algorithm.
Exactly.
Well, to everyone listening, go enjoy whatever it is you are hiding from the world tonight. Do it totally guilt-free, or rather, perfectly, delightfully guilty.